Today we're going to be talking about your growing zones and your first frost date and your last frost date and when you should plant and when you should start seeds and all of that, because it can be really confusing. As a first-time gardener, I wasn't really sure what all of this meant, and luckily I had some really good YouTube mentors. But one of the questions that I see over and over and over again in my gardening groups on Facebook and things like that is, when can I start planting my seeds? Especially in this time of year, if you have started getting your seed catalogs and you're going through and you've placed your seed order because you are on top of things, which congratulations, good on you, you should be. You're excited. You want to see those baby plants grow and you want to get them in the ground as soon as possible so you can maximize the amount of vegetables and fruit that you're getting from your garden. And that's great. I love that for you and I'm so excited with you. But usually the question is phrased, when can I start planting? I'm in growing zone 6B, for example, is a question that I'll see quite often. And this is a great question because you know that you probably shouldn't just start planting willy-nilly. And you know your growing zone, but your growing zone has very little to do with when you can plant things. So for example, I'll throw up a picture right here. This is of growing zone 6. And as you can see, there's a lot of area that's in growing zone 6. Just knowing your growing zone isn't going to help you when you're talking about when you should plant outside. So to be very clear, growing zones are specifically about how cold it gets in your area. That's it. It's not even how warm it gets in your area. It's just the lowest temperature that it gets in your area. So for example, I'm in growing zone 8B. I live in Southern Oregon, and kind of this little tucked away hidden gem in Oregon where we have really great temperate weather. And so because I live in such a beautiful place, I have a lot of things that I can grow because of my growing zone, because it doesn't get super cold. However, it will freeze where I live. And that's basically what your growing zone tells you. Does it get cold where you live? And if so, how cold is cold? So for example, people who live in the southernmost point of Florida, it never freezes there. You can have all sorts of things. People who live in Mexico can grow pepper trees, and you can grow banana trees, because again, you're never getting those freezing temperatures. But as it gets colder and colder and colder, that limits the amount and the types of foods that you can grow over winter. They're called frost hardy fruits and vegetables. And in like Mexico, things like tulips will be much more difficult to grow, because tulips need a stratifying period where they get really cold. So if you're in Mexico and you want to grow tulips, you're going to have to refrigerate or freeze those tulips before you plant them. Otherwise, they're never going to know, oh, hey, it's been winter and now it's not, so now it's my time to grow. So there's different needs for each plant, and the heat and the cold of it really tells you what's going to be best for the plants. And the growing zones can be really helpful when determining what plants you should plant when it comes to perennial plants. For everything else, a really important piece of information that you need to actually make really good decisions about what you're growing is your first and last frost date. Or actually, I should say it reversely. It's your last and first frost date. Your last frost date is the last time it frosts before your warm weather. So where I live, the last frost date is typically the beginning of May. And your first frost date is when you get your first frost after your warm weather. So here where I live, it's mid-October to November, depending on the year. 2 years ago, we didn't have any frost until like until January. And I honestly believed that we just didn't get frost. Which is silly because I've lived here for a long time and I've seen snow on the ground, but I was like, well, clearly it's just not as cold as I thought it was. So the reason why you need to know this information is because that is what tells you when you can plant things out. For tomato plants, you want to start your tomato plants typically 6 to 12 weeks before your last frost date. And that time period is going to grow or shrink depending on how long your growing season is. So for example, I watch a lot of YouTubers in the South because there's a lot of gardening YouTubers in the South and homesteading YouTubers, and that's kind of my passion. And so for them, they have this window of really good weather and then it gets too hot for a lot of their plants, and they have a small window when they're not really growing new things. It's too hot to grow new things, it's too humid to grow new things, and their garden kind of tapers off. And then after that hot season, then they grow some more into the fall, and then after it starts frosting and freezing at night, they go ahead and start a different type of crops, and they're planting different things. Where I live here in Southern Oregon, we have a pretty moderate temperature. It doesn't get over 90 degrees very often, and even if it does, it's just for a couple of days. So plants that don't like heat might be stunted for a few days, but a few days later, they're gonna get the drink of water that they need and they're gonna just pep right back up. So my growing season is about, well, it depends on where you look, but anywhere from 95 to 120 days. June, July, August, September, and part of October. So 4.5, 5 months is how much time I have to grow food that is not frost hardy. So that's the other thing you need to know. Some food you can plant out and it can handle being frosted on. For example, garlic needs to be planted in the fall. Don't tell the garlic I have sitting in my cupboard that it should be planted. Cabbages and a lot of your lettuces and spinach, any brassica, that would be broccoli and cauliflower, carrots, radishes. Those aren't brassicas, but there are other examples of things that can handle some light freezing. And you can grow those things in the fall and in the winter in my area, but maybe not in some place much colder like Alaska. If you're from Alaska and you're a gardener, let me know what you can grow in the winter. Again, knowing your growing zone is going to really help you know what you can grow in which seasons from a cold perspective. How cold does it get, and what plants can I grow that can withstand that cold weather? What it doesn't tell you is when to start your seeds, and for that you're going to need to know your last and first frost dates. So like I was saying, look up your area, just Google it really quick. The Farmer's Almanac is a great resource that tells you when your last frost date is, and then you know, okay, my last frost date is April 1st, so I'm going to have everything started before April 1st. Some of you have growing zones that are so long, you might decide, hey, I don't need to start things inside. It's fine. I will sacrifice 2 weeks of tomatoes in order not to start things inside. I can just start my tomatoes directly outside. If you have that, I'm a little envious of you, and great. Don't put in the extra effort of starting things inside if you don't need to. But for those of us who do need to start things inside or want to start things inside to extend that growing season a little bit, knowing your last and first frost dates are what you're going to need to be best prepared for that. Some of the things that you're going to want to start inside if you are starting seeds inside would be things like tomatoes and bell peppers, maybe some squash, but really quickly you'd want to start that maybe a week or two before it's time to plant out. The back of the seed packet is gonna tell you whether or not it's recommended that you transplant or start these plants indoors and then plant outdoors. And so if you haven't seen my video about how to read a seed packet, check that out. I'll link it right up here. And that will give you a lot of really good information about how to read a seed packet, how to make good choices based on the back of your seed packet. I think this really wraps up what you need to know about growing zone versus your first and last frost dates. I think the only other thing that you should just keep in mind is how hot it gets and when your hot seasons are. If you're unfamiliar, find a local gardener who can really mentor you. You don't need to learn everything from them, but somebody who can tell you it always frosts until Mother's Day, like a local gardener here told me. Whatever it is that a local gardener can give you and teach you is really valuable. If you know something else about growing zones and frost dates that you think I missed, please add it in the comment section below. I'm really hoping to have the comment section just be a treasure trove of information for new gardeners and seasoned gardeners alike. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. I would love to have you be part of our community here. There's a lot of really good information coming your way. I think the next thing we're going to talk about is tomatoes, because I want to talk about tomato plants. Tomatoes are kind of one of those things that everybody wants, and if it's your first year gardening, it can be intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. So I will talk with you later, and until next time, what have you found in your garden?